Hello, everyone. This is book one for August 2020 Negro President Jefferson and the Slave Powers by Gary Wills. It's a very good book, mainstream book, um, but I wanted to bring it to you to deal with the black vote and black representation. So let's continue. As a bargaining chip to secure both his concerns, proportional representation in the Senate as well as the House, and representation of the slaves, Madison offered a suggestion of only free whites should be counted in one chamber and slaves should be fully counted in the other. He said he would not push this because it looked divisive, and whichever count was used in the House would have greater weight than in the smaller, but still proportional, numbers in the Senate. But he brought the proposal up again 10 days later as the proper ground for compromise. He was hoping that a compromise of this compromise would lead to proportional representation in the Senate and at least partial counting of slaves in the House. Madison's stress on regional conflict was voiced by Charles Pinckney too. There is a real distinction between northern and southern interests. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia in their rice and indigo had a particular interest which might be sacrificed. The three-fifths provision was defeated 6-4 on July 11th, but prevailed on July 12th 6-2 with two states divided. The deciding factor, as Governor Morris admitted, was the threat of the South not to ratify unless this concession were made. He was against granting the concession. Mr. Governor Morris was compelled to declare himself reduced to the dilemma of doing injustice to Southern states or to human nature, and he must therefore do it to the former, for he could never agree to give such encouragement to the slave trade as would be given by allowing them a representation for their Negroes, and he did not believe those states would ever confederate on terms that would deprive them of that trade. I think he was right. William Davie, a delegate from North Carolina, put the South's ultimatum this way. Mr. Davie said it was high time now to speak out. He saw that it was meant by some gentlemen to deprive the Southern states of any share of representation for their blacks. He was sure that North Carolina would never confederate on any terms that did not rate them at least as three-fifths. In the Eastern states meant therefore to exclude them altogether. The business was at an end. Morris answered Davie by saying that a union of North and South was therefore impossible. It is in vain for the Eastern states to insist on what the Southern states will never agree to. It is equally vain for the latter to require that the other states can never admit, and he verily believed that the people of Pennsylvania will never agree to a representation of Negroes. The three-fifths rule was adopted not because of any estimate of blacks' productivity or even of a trade-off between representation and taxation. It was because the South felt it needed a greater share in the representation, as Davies explained the matter to his fellow North Carolinians. The Eastern states had great jealousies on the subject. They insisted that their cows, horses were equally entitled to representation, that the one was property as well as the other. It became our duty, on the other hand, to acquire as much weight as possible in the legislation of the Union, and as the Northern states were more populous in whites, this only could be done by insisting that a certain proportion of our slaves should make a part of the computed population. Pinckney made the same point to South Carolinians. We determined that representatives should be apportioned among the several states by adding the whole number of free persons, three-fifths of the slaves. We thus obtained a representation for our property, and I confess I do not expect that we had conceded too much to the Eastern states when they allowed us a representation of a species of property which they have not among them. Alexander Hamilton admitted that 3/5 proviso was the sine qua non of ratification. Without this indulgence, no union could possibly have been formed. The states in which slavery is prohibited ultimately, though with reluctance, acquiesced in the disproportionate number of representatives and electors that was secured to the slaveholding states. The concession was, at the time, believed to be a great one, and has proved to have been the greatest which was made to secure the adoption of the Constitution. So here you have people in the room discussing our fate. We're never in the room. We're never consulted, of course. We're never even thought about in terms of what our needs and are. And we're still kind of that way, but for the last 50 years, we've allowed ourselves to be that way. And that's a shame. Until next time, I want to thank you for your support. I want to say take care of your mind, take care of your body, and stay safe.